So today we're going to do the handover video on this Autotrail Imala 615. We're going to start on the outside and then we're going to move on to the inside. Firstly, I'd like to begin to say that this vehicle hasn't had a valet as of yet. I'm just trying to get this video done to you, filmed and sent out to you just before your collection, so you've got it in time for when you come down. Now, moving over to the passenger side, you can see that you've got your fill-up point here. Open up the flap and that's where your diesel tank is, and that's where you can fill the van up. Opening up the passenger door, you'll notice that you've got your bonnet release catch, which is just here. Pull that to release the bonnet. And whilst we're here, you'll also notice you've got Remis cab blinds fitted to this vehicle. With these Remis cab blinds, all you'll need to do is simply pinch and pull out like so, and then lead the blind from the bottom and let them connect up via the magnetic strip. You've got the same again at the front, and the same on the other side, of course. And when you're done with these, simply pull away from the magnetic strip and then angle the blind, leading it from the bottom like so. Push it up and that just connects into place, ready for when you're travelling off. Now, as a rule of thumb with anything in a motorhome, if it feels like it's being forced, you're probably doing something wrong. So just bear that in mind. Anything like this, you just need to take a minute just to obviously reassess what you're doing if it does feel like it is being forced. Moving round and underneath the bonnet, there's not many things that you need to know underneath the bonnet. The main things are if you're ever jump starting the vehicle. If that is the case, you've got your negative terminal, which is just located at the front here, as indicated by the sticker above, and your positive terminal is just underneath this cap. There's a little plus sign on there. All you'll need to do is flick this cap off, and that's where you can connect your positive side. Now, other than that, a couple more things just to point out. You've got your engine oil here along with your engine dipstick below. You've then got your brake disc fluid above that. Your engine coolant is next to that, along with your power steering fluid. And then finally in the corner, you can see that you've got your washer fluid for the front windscreen. Moving around to the side of the vehicle, you can see that you've got a vent here. Currently, this is for the vent for the boiler itself. Now, we'll just remove the cover. And with the cover removed, you can see that the vent is exposed. So when you're traveling, this cover needs to remain on, so then any debris from the road or any dirt doesn't get into the vent. But then when you're stationary on site and you're using the boiler, you need to ensure that this is off at all times. If this remains on and you try to operate the boiler, what will happen is it will fail. And after you've done it 3 times, that will mean that you've gassed out the system and you'll have to reset the boiler. So please ensure that that cover is removed when using the boiler, and then when you're travelling, the cover simply snaps back on, just like so. Now, directly underneath here, you can see that you've got a grey valve here, and this leads us on to your first drain down point in the vehicle. This is the waste drain down point, and all you'll need to do to drain that down is turn the handle like so, and that will open the valve up and drain down the tank. Now, you can see we've nothing in the tank at the moment, so nothing's draining out, but that's where you need to do it from. Now, you have 3 main drain down points in the vehicle. You've got your wastewater, which is located here, your fresh water, which is just at the back here, we'll get onto that shortly, and then your boiler drain down point, which is located on the inside of the van. Now, for all your drain down points, when you're on site, there'll be a big grid that you need to drive over. Line yourself up with that and then simply open all of your tanks, and that will empty all the water out into the grid. And then when you're travelling home, if you leave all your taps and tanks open, all that residual water will make its way out of the van and will ensure that there's no water remaining in the vehicle for when you come to store it. Now, what I personally recommend is, if it is a cold day, personally, to leave the wastewater tank open, as this tank is underslung. If you use a bucket and just pop that underneath, leave that tank open, it will just ensure any wastewater will not sit in the tank, and it will sit into your fresh water, your bucket underneath. Again, ensuring that there's no frozen water in the van. But you do need to get into the habit of draining down the van every time you've stopped using it, to ensure that there's no water remaining, to basically eliminate the possibility of you getting any frozen water in the system. Moving up, You've then got your point for your 230 volt hookup cable, as you can see. So this is where you're on site. You want to supply the vehicle with it 230 volt mains electric. Simply connect the cable into there, and that will give you 230 volt main supply. Next, you've then got your gas locker. With your gas locker open, you can see that you've got an opportunity or space to store 2 gas bottles in here. You've got your metal regulator here, and this is a pigtail which will connect onto here, and then that will then feed into the gas bottle itself. When you're travelling, please ensure that the gas is turned off, as you don't want to be travelling with gas on, because if you do, if you are involved in a collision, obviously it's very dangerous. So please ensure when you're travelling, your gas is turned off at the bottle, but then when you're on site, simply turn that on. And as I say, this pigtail will connect to your regulator and then feed into your gas bottle, allowing the gas to flow through the vehicle. Next up is your cassette toilet. To remove this and empty this system, all you need to do is pull up on the orange tab like so, and then remove it. All you'll need to do is keep pulling and slide this cassette out like so. Just drop it onto the ground here for you. And then to empty this, all you'll need to do is pull out the funnel, remove the grey cap on the top, and then using the orange button at the back, that will release an internal vacuum on the inside of the cassette and will allow you to empty the entire contents of the cassette where you need to on site. Once you've done that, you can put a bit of water in here just to swill out the system. And if you are using blue fluid to break down the waste, all you'll need to do is just pop that blue fluid in the top of this cap. There's a little measurement in there that indicates how much you require. That can then go back on, push the funnel back into position, and then you can put the cassette back into the locker. Now you will also notice that you've got this orange valve here. This turns. This should always stay in this position. There should be no need for you to turn this. If this is slightly off, the cassette will not be able to be pushed back into the locker. This should always, as I say, remain in this position. This is what makes contact with the blade on the toilet. Now on the toilet you've got a blade which opens and closes the cassette, and now I'll show you how to operate that when you're on the inside of the vehicle. But before removing the cassette, you should always ensure that that blade is closed, and then, as I say, when you're popping the cassette back in, this should just make sure this is always at this position. If that is slightly off, it will not allow you to push it back in. And as I say, you don't want to force it or damage it, as that will consequently break the cassette, and you'll require a new one, which aren't cheap. So once you've drained it down, all you'll need to do is simply push the cassette back into position, let the orange handle connect into place, and that is then good for transit. Now directly below the cassette, you can see that you've got your fresh water tank, as indicated by the blue valve. Same goes for, as I mentioned, on the wastewater. When you're on site and you have a big grid, all you need to do is turn this valve and that will dump all the water. And as I say, you can leave that open when you are travelling. Moving to the back of the vehicle, you can see that this vehicle has got a bike rack fitted. To operate the bike rack, all you'll need to do is simply loosen this. This arm will then pop up, and you can then slot the bike rack down like so. When you've got your bikes on, all that happens is the wheels will connect into here, and then using these are almost like a zip tie, you can link these through the wheels and tighten them into position. These will then connect to the framework of the bike, and again you can tighten them in position so you're ready for transit. They just connect back up, lock the arm into place, and then you're good to go. Up at the top you can see that this vehicle has got a reversing camera, as indicated there, and moving round the side you've got your fill up point for your fresh water tank. So when you're filling up the fresh water tank, you'll need your key to unlock this, and then using a food grade hose pipe that will go into the tank, and that will allow you to fill it up. This vehicle will hold approximately 100 litres of fresh water. So with that in mind, when you're filling up the tank, just keep an eye on obviously when you're filling it. When it's overflowing, you've obviously filled the tank. Once you've done that, stick the cap back on and you're good to move on to your pitch. Now bear in mind, I personally don't recommend drinking out of the fresh water tank. I do advise to use a food grade hose pipe so you don't get any build up of bacteria in the pipe when putting the water in there, but I personally wouldn't recommend drinking directly out of the tank. You're okay if you're washing up and obviously you're you're boiling the water, but if you are drinking water, I personally recommend using bottled water, so just bear that in mind. Next up, you've then got your habitation door, which will gain you access into the van. We'll go in there shortly, and you can see that you've also got your step to help you in. On this side, you've then got your fridge vents. Now do bear in mind, if it is a hot day, what you may want to do is just try and keep this area under shade or away from the sun, because this is where the fridge pulls its air from, and naturally if it is quite a hot day it's going to struggle pulling the air from it, so it'll just allow it to run a little bit more efficiently if you do keep this area under shade. You can also buy winter covers for these, which just slot on for when you're storing the vehicle during the winter months. And then finally on this side you've got a locker here, and with the locker open you can see it gains you a little bit of access into the storage on the underside of the van. You've also got a compartment here. If you lift this up, it's just locked at the moment. This is where it houses your leisure batteries for the vehicle. Okie dokie, so we're now on the inside of the vehicle. As you walk through the habitation door, directly above you is your control panel. Click your main power switch on and you can see that activates your lights. That is your main 12-volt isolator button, and that will turn on and off everything in the motorhome. Firstly, you've then got your leisure battery level. That will indicate how much 12-volt power you've got in your battery. You've then got your vehicle battery level, as indicated by the V in the battery. You can see that's at a similar level. You've then got your pump button. Click that on to activate the pump. And then you've got your fresh water level as well. Obviously, we have nothing at the moment, hence why it's reading red. Now, your pump button, obviously only run that when you've got water in the tank. So I won't run it for the purpose of this video, but when you're on site and you're filled up with your fresh water tank, or your fresh water, all you'll need to do is click this button and then go to your taps, including your shower, and then turn them on and turn them to hot. What that will do is it'll pull fresh water from the fresh water tank into the boiler and then out to the tap. It will spurt and splutter, and then when it's running steadily, you've primed your system for your hot water. Once you've done that, flick it over to cold and do the exact same again for all your taps, and when it's running steadily, you've primed your system for your hot water, for your cool water, and then you are good to go. Once you've done that, you can then leave your pump on, because on each of your taps you've got something called a micro switch, which will activate and deactivate the pump whenever you need it. A little bit like when you're at home, when you turn the tap on, your water automatically pulls through. So it's the exact same thing. The only time you need to turn that pump off is when you've got no water in the vehicle, so just bear that in mind. Now the reason I tell you to turn the hot water on first, pull it through the boiler, is that will prime the boiler. So what that will ensure is when you come to turn your heating on, one, there's water in the boiler for it to heat up, so it won't fail. But two, it will by pulling that water through the boiler, you can turn your heating on straight away, which will give it a chance to start heating up that water. So by the time you've got everything sorted and you're ready to use your hot water, that water will be nice and warm. It's not obviously like water at home where it's instant hot water. It is going to take, you know, at least 40 minutes or 30 to 40 minutes to get it up to temperature. So if that's the first thing you do on site, pull the water through and then turn your heating on, which I'll show you how to do later. It'll ensure that the water has a chance to get up to temperature for when you want to use it. That concludes the control panel. On this side as well, you've got a little switch. That's for the outdoor light over the door. Moving round and into the kitchen area, we've spoken obviously about priming your system. Here you've got 3 hobs along with an electric hob. They're 3 gas burners, and that's of course electric for when you're hooked up to 230 volt. And you've also got, and here if I pull this up, a plug socket that just slots in there. Now bear in mind that the plug sockets, including the electric hob, will only work off 230 volt when you're plugged in, so please bear that in mind. Whilst we're here as well, on all your windows you've got blackout blinds and also fly screens. And then if you're wanting to open these windows, simply pull at the hinges and open, and then using the black knobs on the side, just tighten them in position, and that will allow you to obviously keep the window open. You can put these windows on venting as well, like so, just to allow a little bit of airflow through the vehicle. But obviously when you're traveling, please ensure that these are closed all the way. That's the same for the skylights, because if these are open and you're traveling, if a little bit of wind gets underneath here, it could potentially pull the window out, and obviously you don't want that, so just bear that in mind. Moving back to your hobs, underneath you've got your oven and grill, and then you've got a really good bit of storage as well in the kitchen. As you can see, there's plenty of storage either side, nice and usable. Finally, you'll also notice there's a button as you walk in on the right hand side, and that is for your step. So again, when you're traveling, make sure that is tucked all the way in, and just do that by pressing that button. Moving over to the fridge, next to the fridge you've got a little compartment here for a freestanding table, and up on the top here you've got plenty of worktop space as well if you're wanting a telly. That can just slot onto there and can power in, and your microwave is just directly above that. Again, this is 230 volt only, so will only work when you're hooked up to mains electric. Now below that is your fridge. So this is a Dometic fridge, and it's a three-way system. The reason it's a three-way system is, in essence, there's three ways to power the fridge. So you can either run it off 230 volt electric as indicated by the plug sign, gas as indicated by the flame symbol, or 12 volt as indicated by the little battery icon. So it depends obviously on your situation. So when you're on site, you're going to be running it off your 230 volt electric. When you're wild camping, you'll be running it off your gas. And then when you're on your 12 volt, when you're running it off your 12 volt with your ignition running, you can select it to the battery. Now a lot of people think that they can run this fridge off the 12 volt battery when they're wild camping. However, that is not the case. It'll only allow you to run it off the gas, because if you was to run this off your 12 volt leisure battery, it will simply just drain the battery of all of its power. So it will only allow you to run it off the 12 volt for when your ignition's running, as this vehicle has got something called an alternator, which will in essence send power from the vehicle battery into the leisure battery, allowing you to power up the fridge. So just bear that in mind. To turn it on, all you need to do is hold this button, and that will turn everything on, and then just flick through by pressing the buttons of whatever fuel you are wanting. On the other side, you've also got a little button here that changes the temperature of the fridge, and then you've also got this little warning triangle. This will light up if there is an issue, as indicated by this sticker. You can reset it through this if you do get a fault with the fridge as well. In the fridge itself, you can see the fridge is just below and your freezer is up at the top. Again, a nice little bit of space. So moving across from the fridge, you can see that you've got your bathroom area. Now we've spoken about obviously priming the system for the taps and the shower. The main thing that I need to cover is the toilet. Now, as I mentioned on the outside, you've got something called a blade on the toilet, which will open and close the cassette when in use. This is the blade, this piece of plastic here. All you need to do is push away from you to open it, pull towards you to close it. So when in use, simply open it so all the waste can drop into the cassette. And then just where the lid is, you've got just there a blue button which indicates a sign for your flush, and you can flush out the entire system. Once you've done that, close the blade like so, for two reasons. The main reason is it will get rid of any odours trying to escape from the cassette, but more importantly is it will get you into the habit of having that closed, so every time you come to remove the cassette you shouldn't run into the issue of it getting jammed or anything like that. Now up at the top, just going back onto this, as I say, the blue button will activate your flush. You will need your pump on for that to activate, so just bear that in mind. And then you'll get a little red light just to indicate when the cassette is full. You can see we've got a red light on at the moment. It's just because we've got some water in there in the cassette at the moment, just to sterilise the cassette, and that is the reason why it's reading red. As soon as you get that, just empty your cassette and then you'll be good to go. So moving on and away from the bathroom, you can see located in here is a really good bit of hanging space. You've also got an aerial in here. To use the aerial, all you'll need to do is make sure that the aerial's turned on. As you can see, there's a little green light on there. You can leave that on. There's a little switch on the top, but just leave that on for the time being. Now the colour of the light will indicate how good the signal is. So when it's reading green, it's a good signal. Amber, it's not so good, and then red isn't the best of signals. To improve that, you can unscrew this just like so and push the aerial into position and then tighten it. and then you can also twist this around to better the signal. You'll also notice you've got a little arm here. You can actually wind that, and that will tilt the head of the aerial, again, to improve your signal. This vehicle has also got motorhome Wi-Fi, as you can see. Now I'll go through this more on more of how to use it on the day, but you will need a little SIM card that can just slot into the back of this, and then as you can see, through these power cables leading up to the aerial, that will then produce your Wi-Fi. You'll have a little menu button in here which will show your password, and then you can then connect to the Wi-Fi system and you're good to go. But as I say, I'll show you how to do that once we've got your SIM on collection. So below that you've then got your heating. So this is the space heater. Now this particular space heater runs off gas. I'll show you how to run it off electric should you want to. Now if you're running it off gas, turn to this knob here and turn it to either 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5, depending on how cold it is. If you want it to get up to temperature really quickly, stick it on 5. Just bear in mind it will of course use a little bit more gas. You'll notice when I turn that on, it's then automatically trying to ignite the system. On the other side, you've then got your fan speed. So you can change the fan speed on here. You can turn it off as it is to auto, which will automatically select the speed for you. Or you can select it on manual mode should you need to. And you can hear that that is then beginning to start the fan. I'll turn it off for now and you're good to go. Now as I mentioned, that particular unit just simply runs off electric. If you want that to run off, gas. If you want that to run off electric, you've got a little control panel here. Very similar concept, really easy this. On the middle icon here, on the O-ring, you can see that it is off. Flick it up to turn it on to 2 kilowatt electric, down to 0.5 kilowatt electric, or down again to 1 kilowatt electric. So it just depends what you're supplied through on the site. 9 times out of 10, if you're on a decent site, you'll be supplied with 2 kilowatt electric. So simply, if you want to run the heating off electric, flick it over to that one there. Failing that, if you are supplied with a little less, you may be resorting to putting it on 1 kilowatt electric or 0.5 kilowatt electric. If that is the case, what I personally recommend is just flicking it onto gas and using the gas instead of the electric, because a vehicle of this size on 1 kilowatt electric or anything less, it's really going to struggle on heating a vehicle of this size. So just bear that in mind. But once you've selected whatever you've got on site, you've then got a little dial here so you can change the temperature and how intense you want that heating to be. Moving along the top, you've got a really good bit of storage here just above the lounge area, and then right at the front here you've got where your Sergeant unit is located. For the Sergeant unit, this is where your fuse box is located along with the RCD breaker. So if the vehicle ever trips, simply come to this point, and if you do blow a fuse, you can just replace them through here. What I personally recommend is taking a spare bag of fuses with you, so if anything ever trips, you've always got a spare fuse to replace it with, should anything blow. You'll also notice a big button here. This is to power on and power down the entire system. You should always keep this on in this position. You should never need to turn that or switch it down. The ways of doing that are through the panel, as I've shown you before. So leave that on and then you'll be good to go. Whilst we're on the topic of fuses as well, just directly behind the driver's seat, you've got a few more fuses here. These are the larger fuses and they're 20 amp fuses. Again, they're just located behind the driver's seat. Moving back up from the driver's seat now, you can also see you've got a really good bit of storage right at the front as well. Again, nice and deep. And again, like I mentioned about your skylights, just ensure that when moving off and travelling, you've got all of these closed firmly. You don't want anything falling out as you're taking corners or anything like that. Down into the lounge, you can see that you've got another control point, and this is for your water heating. So we've spoken obviously about the vehicle heating or the room heating, and this is for the water heating, and you've got a couple of options. So you can either run this off gas or electric, again depending on the setup. Now 9 times out of 10 if you're on site you'll run it off the electric, but if you're wild camping you run it off your boiler, off your gas. So if that is the case, if you're running it off the gas, it's this first one here. Now in the middle, this button is indicating off. Flick that up, turn it on, or flick it down to again turn it on, and it just depends on the temperature that you want to select. If you're wanting to run it off or get the water up to about 50 degrees, flick it up, or if you're wanting the water to get up to 70 degrees, just flick it down. And as I say, in the middle, that just indicates that it's off. So when you're obviously washing up, you'll probably want it on 70 degrees, and then when you're taking a shower, you'll want it on 50 degrees. And as I say, that is for the gas, and it's a very similar idea on the electric. Up for 1 kilowatt electric, down for 2 kilowatt electric. Again, depending on how much electric you are supplied with on site. Now, if it is especially a cool day and you want that water to get up to temperature the quickest, I'd personally recommend sticking it on gas, as gas will always get it up to temperature the quickest. But if you're not too bothered about that and it's quite a warm day, just flick it on to electric, providing you've got the power. As I mentioned, when them buttons are on the middle, that indicates that they're off, and then by flicking them up or down, we'll turn them on. Now behind these controls is where your boiler is located. You can see I've just removed the cushion off the top here to show you where your boiler is. Now don't worry about your boiler, it looks really confusing. All you need to know is your final drain down point, which is this here. This is your final drain down point in the vehicle, and this is for your boiler drain down point. To drain this down, leave it in the up position like so, and then to seal it, flick it down. So when you're on site, all you'll need to do, flick that down, pull the water through and prime the system as I mentioned, turn the heating on, which is down here for the water heating, and that will begin to heat the water. You never want to turn your heating on with no water in the vehicle, in the boiler that is, so just bear that in mind. So please ensure that that is closed down when you're using it, and then drained when you're not using it. And all you'll need to do, as I say, simply flick that up to drain down the valve. Now, we do get a lot of calls, especially coming into the season, where people have not used the van over the winter, so this is left up, and people often forget about this. And we'll get calls where they'll say that the water's draining out of the van, and it doesn't make sense. It's all to do with this. People often tend to forget that this needs to be closed to obviously seal the unit. I'll leave that up for the time being, but it's dead easy and dead simple. As you can see, your lounge is now back together, and on the other side you've got a really good bit of storage underneath this bench seat. Now, to convert this into your big double bed is dead simple. All you've got to do is simply pull this out and pull this side out, and they simply meet into the middle, and this creates a big bed. And as you can see, your bed is made, so you're good to go. What I personally recommend is when sleeping on this, use a mattress topper. That will just take the contours out of the seats and just provide a nice even layer for you to sleep on. And that concludes the handover video on this Autotrail Imala 615. I hope you enjoyed.